Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. I'm going to try something a little fun and different now, where I'm going to start off a new series where I'm going to try and predict the roster for the 3 remaining Chaos Gods. Given what we've seen for the Khorne roster, it should be easy enough to speculate regarding this. Now, before anything, what we have to do is discuss how Slaanesh's faction usually focused around in the lore and the tabletop. As we are all aware, all the Chaos factions were radically different in lore and tabletop, and they all had their own specific playstyles, which made them quite thematic. Khorne, as we are all aware, focused on pure brute strength. There was no magic involved and not a lot of different things. It's just focused around getting your forces front and center into the battlefield and doing as much damage as possible, lock down your enemies and just shatter them fast. Slaanesh, on the other hand, was focused around fast-moving units, very heavily relying on a mixture of magic and skirmishing combat. So we're not expecting a lot of tanky heavy armor, but hard-hitting mobility. So with that being said, let's jump into first the Legendary Lord. I mean, it's easy enough to guess who the Legendary Lord will be, and that will be Nikari. The Keeper of Secrets has been mentioned throughout Warhammer 2 on a number of occasions. It's almost like Creative Assembly were outright confirming her without actually confirming her. Nikari had no official model, and of course, because of that, no official rules either, so we don't really know exactly how the character would be able to play, more or less. Official artwork like the stuff shown on screen does exist, but a lot of representation of Nikari has changed over the years, mostly through description. However, it is very well known that Nikari is Slaanesh's greatest Keeper of Secrets, and has led many devastating battles against the High Elves, more specifically during the Rape of Ulthuan. Also, another reason why Nikari is so expected is because they've gone for Scarbrands, so it only makes sense to add in another greater demon. In all perfect honesty here, I would prefer a character like Azazel over Nikari. It's just a character I'm more interested in, but it does make sense to have each Legendary Lord for each respective Chaos faction to be a great demon. Nikari has been a main focus on books, and is just very well known. There's even some sort of lore which kinda hints that Nikari has lain with Morathi a few times. Though granted, this is Morathi we're talking about, so really, I don't expect anything else. But now let's move on to the generic Lord options, and of course these are kinda no-brainers as they follow the same format as Khorne. The Exalted Keeper of Secrets would be your first one, a monstrous Legendary Lord, and obviously we're expecting them to look like the Age of Sigmar variant, as that was the one shown on the announced trailer, which is perfectly fine. They look pretty cool, to be honest. Exalted Keeper of Secrets are expected to be quite fast moving across the battlefield, decent in melee combat, but also have access to magic. The Lore of Shadows and the Lore of Slaanesh are usually the only two used within Slaaneshi ranks, so we can either expect a pure Keeper of Secrets, just melee combat wise, or a hybrid Lord. The thing is, of course, we're expecting the Herald of Slaanesh to be able to be usable here too as a Lord option. Again, decent in melee combat and fast moving. On the tabletop, the Herald of Slaanesh also had access to the Lore of Shadows and the Lore of Slaanesh, so it could be expected that both will be magic/melee hybrid. The stark difference between the two, of course, is that the Exalted Keeper would be much more powerful in terms of melee combat, and the Herald should be weaker but faster moving, as it can be expected that they'll have mount options. In fact, on the tabletop they had 3 possible mount options: the Steed of Slaanesh, the Seeker Chariot of Slaanesh, and the Exalted Seeker Chariot of Slaanesh, all of which lent to mobility and some extra damage. Of course, the Exalted Seeker Chariot was the strongest one. It can also be assumed, just like the Herald of Khorne, the Exalted Seeker Chariot of Slaanesh will provide some buffs, very similar to that of the Blood Throne. In fact, the Herald of Slaanesh had 3 possible Locus upgrades, which were the Lesser Locus of Grace, the Greater Locus of Swiftness, and the Exalted Locus of Beguilement. They'll have to work things around to actually make things, well, Total War compatible, but it's very possible that this could be the effect. Now we can start moving on to the generic hero options, and there's obviously going to be 2, as Khorne also had 2. It's a given that we're going to have the Allurus of Slaanesh as a hero option, mainly because the Blood Reaper, which was a unit champion for the Bloodletters, ended up being a hero option, and the Allurus is the unit champion for the Demonettes. It can be assumed that the Allurus will also have similar mount options to that of the Herald, and playstyle-wise, it's probably going to be another hybrid / caster, which is curious to me as of course we're expecting a mortal hero too, very similar to that of the Cultist of Khorne. There is the Cultist Magnus of Slaanesh. So unless this hero type is focused radically on buffing units rather than being up close and personal, and let's be honest, it doesn't look like something that would actually last long in the battlefield, they might have to split the battlefield role between both heroes. With everything being said, it can be assumed that the Cultist Magnus would probably ride a Chaos Steed very much similar to that of the Chaos Cultist of Khorne. Preferably it would have been better if they'd ride a Steed of Slaanesh, as it just fits with the theme more, but that could be linked to possible stuff when it comes to the roster when we get to it now. Let's move on to the infantry and we'll go through the obvious additions first, the Demonettes and Exalted Demonettes of Slaanesh. So what sets apart Demonettes from other Demon Chaff is the fact that they are very fast moving. Again, this is a reoccurring theme with the Slaanesh style. On the tabletop, they moved very quickly and had a flurry of attacks to go with them. They were very much considered a glass cannon infantry, which gave them a little bit of variety. The purpose of this was to move up your infantry to lock the enemy down and then have them surrounded by various different forms of cavalry and chariots. So it can be assumed that they'll work in the exact same way, an anti-infantry melee unit which should be able to move quick, though will be able to take a lot of damage themselves as they deal it. Presumably for both you'll have to keep them buffed up, and of course the Exalted Demonettes might have to be a bit more tougher so they can survive a little longer. Now when looking to the mortal units, Khorne had access to 3 Chaos Warrior variants. This made sense for Khorne as of course he requires some heavily armored troops that can go in and do damage alongside the Bloodletters. It doesn't fit too well for the theme for Slaanesh, however, as yes, you do get some heavily armored units, but they generally weren't as common. And of course, it would be better for the Chaos factions if they were differentiated not just by the demons, but also the mortal servants. For that, I think that they should actually take some Norskin units instead. The Chaos Marauders, the Marauder Spearmen, and possibly the Marauder Hunters? Give that skirmishing feel, as obviously Norskins are generally focused around skirmishing combat. So you've got these guys and 1 range unit, which is going to help you out. They might not be the best, but you've already got some variety there. Some basic shielded, some basic anti-large, and of course the very basic rage, which not even Khorne has access to. The Marauders themselves are a well-known armor-piercing unit, and funny enough, Slaanesh focuses around poison and armor-piercing, so this already fits quite well. Now we move on to Cavalry, and there might be more here for Slaanesh than there would be for any other Chaos God. Naturally, we look towards the Seekers of Slaanesh. These are fast cavalry which also generally have poison attacks. It's expected that you would use them in Warhammer 3 exactly how people would use them on the tabletop. They were your skirmishing cav. You'd use them to get around areas very quickly, hit your enemy in the side or in the rear, and then move out before too much damage could be done. Cycle charging would of course be very popular here, and it makes sense again with the theme of Slaanesh. This would of course make way for the mortal variants, the Hellstriders with spears and the Hellstriders with Hellscourges. The spear variant would be spear and shield, being very akin to lancers in a very honest opinion, as the spear was more of a mutation more than anything. The Hellscourges themselves are whips, which would be able to do a bit extra armor-piercing damage, but the idea remains the same. They are skirmishing cav. You're not supposed to expect heavy cav like Khorne had with the Skull Crushers and the Blood Crushers. We're not just done yet with cavalry, as of course now we have to bring into account the Seeker Chariot of Slaanesh and of course the Hellflayer. I know some of you might be wondering where the Exalted Seeker Chariot is, but I'm leaving that out till later. The Seeker is very easy to explain. It's a basic chariot, fast moving and a very capable line breaker. This is likely to be the most heavily armored unit in your roster, as usually chariots do come with some extra padding. If you're used to chariots with the Norskins or the Tomb Kings, they would be used in the exact same way, but now we move towards the Hellflayer. Hellflares are now the chariots, but used in a very different way. The whirling blades in the back of the Hellflare made them an anti-infantry unit, and I could see them being introduced into the game to have more of a function similar to that of the Skaven Doomflare. You just throw them in and let them do their damage as they whirl around. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to have some anti-infantry stuff anyway. Plus, it looks absolutely awesome, and they are quite fun in the tabletop too. But that's enough for Cavalry, and as you can see, that's already 5 units, but it makes a lot more sense. Khorne only had access to 2 cavalry, but they were heavy cavalry units, so they should be able to do a decent amount of damage on their own. Whereas Slaanesh might need some variety to add some extra spice, and we're not expecting as many monsters, which we're going to start covering now. Chaos Furies are very much expected, as they are one of the very few Chaos Demons of Undivided, which is usable by all different factions. It would make no sense to add one in and then have nothing else to show for it. The same pretty much goes for Chaos Warhounds, but this time with the poison variant, as poison is so heavily used by Slaanesh's forces. Both of these units are basic cheap chaff, which just fits with the theme. They're fast moving, and they would be used as skirmishing units too. Fiends of Slaanesh also come into effect here, where they would basically have the same role as a Chaos Spawn, just a lot faster. Essentially, they both had the same battlefield role, more or less, on the tabletop too, but Fiends themselves would just travel around in larger packs, but I'm assuming that that won't be the case here. Just think of it as a very, very fast Chaos Spawn, and I guess again skirmishing based, but these are the types of monsters that you can throw in and do as much damage as possible. Though they are expected not to have Unbreakable as most Chaos Spawn, because a Fiend is not a spawn, it just has the same functionality. Of course, we can also expect the Keeper of Secrets monster variant, which doesn't really need that much explaining, as we already know that this is already a common thing with Khorne, and it can be very much expected with all the other different Chaos Gods to have an Exalted variant for a Lord choice, and a monster variant just to have a big beastie on the battlefield. In regards to Beastmen, I can see them either having an Ungor Raider and a basic Ungor unit, or 2 Centigore options, that with the standard Centigore and the other one with throwing axes, just to add once again more skirmishing capabilities and a little bit of range. In an honest opinion, it will likely focus around the Centigores, which yes, it might be a lot in terms of cavalry for Slaanesh, but it does fit the theme quite well. Plus Centigores are known to be, well, excessive, aren't they, so it kind of fits. The Soul Grinder could also be a possible option for all 4 Chaos Gods, as that would be the only way some of the gods would have some form of artillery or even some range in other cases. There were a few different types of Soul Grinder because you could upgrade them to be different in the tabletop, and I assume that it could be the same way here. They're fast moving too, so it fits with the theme of Slaanesh, so you can have them in the front line as a line breaker, but also we know that they do have some form of weaponry that they can fire whilst on the move, and this might be the only thing which does some sort of artillery based firing, so it does help out for Slaanesh, which might need it, as yeah, right now Slaanesh is focusing around this Norska type of playstyle, which admittedly does feel well when it comes to Slaanesh, but some heavy hitting will be useful. And lastly, we have war machines, which really there's none, though I did mention that we would see the Exalted Seeker Chariot somewhere, which in theory could be introduced with a different name and be used as a buffer type of chariot. Just something that can buff up their units and also be a chariot so it can keep up with the rest of the roster. It's nothing too special, but then again it might be needed to keep the balance in effect. You'll want something to keep up with the rest of your stuff, won't you? With all that being said, now the Slaanesh roster, to my interpretation, could be at 23 units. That's 2 more than Khorne had, which I don't think is too much of an issue given what was added in. It's obviously not as powerful as Khorne's melee capabilities, though if they do want to keep it hardlocked to 21, which I don't think is the case when it comes to faction releases, I'm not too sure, but I believe that in Game 2 and Game 1 there were different numbers when it came to total units at release. But if they do want to keep it hardlocked, they can easily remove, say, the Hell Scourges and the Chaos Warhounds. They wouldn't really be too needed. Though I think that this army, as we're seeing right now, is quite realistic in terms of what we could expect. Now, of course, I will eventually cover Tzeentch and Nurgle, and they should be drastically different too, while still having the similar feel. Obviously, this is pure speculation, but I think it's easy enough to guess what the rosters will be eventually, whilst we wait for some more news. But what do you guys think about this potential style of roster for Slaanesh? I know some people might not be too keen because it's going to focus very heavily on skirmishing combat, but I think it could be quite nice. In my opinion, it's important for the Chaos rosters not to act the same, or else it's just going to get super boring. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.